Gentlemen, what's going on? It's Larry Hagner with the Good Dad Project podcast. Welcome to 5 Minute Thursdays. And this is a special 5 Minute Thursday episode because we're doing something that we have never done before. Today marks the 25th episode of 5 Minute Thursdays. And for that, I've got a special treat for you guys. To date, man, we have never had a guest on 5 Minute Thursdays. And I can't think of a better guest to have on for our first one, and especially in the theme of 5 Minute Thursdays, because I don't even know why we call it 5 Minute Thursdays. It's always like a 10 or 15 minute show, but it's perfect for today because my guest does something very, very unique. He's a coach, and he coaches people for literally 15 minutes or 15 minutes at a time, which is really, really cool. And I got to experience this, and I've been working with him a little bit, and I've gotten to know him really, really well. He's also a part of our Dad Edge mastermind group, and he's just a phenomenal individual. And guys, for all the links and to connect with our guest today, which I'll introduce him here in a second, go to this episode, which is gooddadproject.com/Thursday25. That's Thursday 25 for this episode. So guys, I have with me today Brian King, who has a master's in social work, and he is a success coach for ADHD and dyslexia, and he teaches his clients how to discover the calm and focus they need to discover their zone of genius. He's been inspiring audiences for over 20 years, and his story of resilience in the face of growing up with ADHD and dyslexia himself and surviving cancer at the age of 18 and now living with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. He is the father of 3 sons with ADHD and Asperger's. He is someone you must get to know. So guys, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Brian King. What's up, man?
Thanks for having me, Larry. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Man, me too. I've had the opportunity, Brian. I mean, I've known you, I guess, online now for maybe about a year or so. And I would say it's just recently that you and I have gotten to know each other decently well. I know you just started, you just registered for our Dad Edge Mastermind. Your group hasn't started yet. It starts next week. But I've gotten a chance and an opportunity to get close to what you do. And you and I actually had a coaching call, you coaching me last week. And I was so blown away by what you do, how you do it. And by the way, the amount of time you do it in. So before we get started today, just tell us a little bit more about you.
Well, you introduced me pretty darn well. My life has been punctuated by a lot of real hard hits and knockdowns, and there's something just about my inherent wiring that tells me, get up one more time, don't stop. This isn't as good as it gets. You got to keep pushing. And it's that's allowed me to endure the cancer, the learning disabilities, the Ehlers-Danlos, which makes some days I can't get out of bed because of it. Some days I need a wheelchair, some days I just need a cane. And with my boys having their own challenges and having to be their advocate, their first role model, and being able to educate the world as well so that it's as welcoming as they can be for people that have differences. And I've been able to turn my advocacy into a larger mission as parents have come to me over time asking me to teach them the strategies that I use for my own mental toughness, and also teach them the parenting strategies that have allowed my boys to overcome so much. And fortunately, I've been able to leverage that into a global coaching business.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And, obviously you said something in there that we talk about a lot, which is mental toughness. And just so we can kind of get a better picture of what exactly is going on, maybe in Brian's world. So how old are your boys?
My boys are 18, 14, and 11.
Okay, and all 3 have ADHD and Asperger's?
Correct.
Okay, and then tell us a little bit about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
What it basically is a faulty gene that's responsible for creating the connective tissue that basically holds your body together. And with Ehlers-Danlos, depending on the type of it, it impacts specific connective tissue. In my case, it's my joints. So my joints are very, very loose to the point where joints come out of place. I have partial dislocations in the joints in my feet. So when I stand up, when I walk across the room, the joints can come partially dislocated, and I can't begin to tell you how much pain that is. When I reach into the cabinet, often my collarbones pop out of place. I need to pop them back in. My shoulders are too loose. My knees and my ankles. So I live in pain every day to a certain degree. I'm on a lot of medications for that. And I don't have the stamina to hardly get up the stairs. If I go up the stairs to the second flight, I need to lay down for 20 minutes, because it takes the air out of me. So that's pretty much what that is.
So thanks for sharing that, man. I really appreciate it. I definitely want our listeners to know just a little bit more about you and what it is that you do and what it is you face on a daily basis. You said something early on when you were talking about just your story a little bit, and that's the mental toughness to keep going. And as you're talking about that, I imagine Rocky. I love Rocky, and I love a lot of the things that he talks about in the movies. The character he is, and he's always talking about like going that one more round. Going that one more round makes all the difference in your life. And I really want our listeners to dial in and hear from you. What is it? Where does that motivation come from for you to keep going? Up one more time, keep going today. Today I'm going to keep going. Where does that come from for you?
Well, some of it I think is genetic. My father is one of the most driven people you'll ever know. He's 76 years old. He looks probably 20 years younger than that. This is a man who used to be a firefighter. He was a ranger in the military, in the Army. And, you just don't quit. I mean, if there's something in your mind, some outcome that you have committed yourself to, nothing short of death will stop you from getting it. So I think that was hardwired into him. And I watched him raise 4 kids on a high school education. Him and my mom started their own business. I saw him working 15-hour days in sweltering heat in unconditioned warehouses, installing security systems so that he could put food on the table for his kids. So I saw that work ethic, and I guess it didn't occur to me throughout my life that it was possible to be beaten. So what I've discovered over time with all my challenges is, like I said, that belief that this is not as good as it's going to get. It's hard now, but if you want to see what good looks like, you've got to keep pushing. And that's really what compels me to keep moving.
Man, I love that. And we just, the episode hasn't aired yet, and it'll air probably in a few weeks. I just interviewed Chris Sinog, who is a Navy SEAL sniper who has actually been one of the world's most elite sniper that I think has ever lived. And I believe he trained Chris Kyle. And,
no kidding.
Yeah. But we talked a lot about the Navy SEALs, and we talked a lot about that training that they had to go through. And he actually talked about a moment, and as you talked about your dad, it reminded me of that moment where he said he was in the 50-hour hell week, and he had been through so much training already, and he and his boat crew were carrying a boat above his head, and all they were doing was walking around in circles just over and over and over again. And he said he actually got up to the point where he physically, mentally said to himself, I am going to die. Like literally he felt that death was coming. And he decided, though, he's like, I'm not going to quit. I would much rather be looked down in the direction, looked down upon as like, wow, that guy gave everything he had and now he's dead, versus being looked right at as he went to ring the bell. So it was that resiliency that you're talking about with your dad, with you, that, hey, like, no matter what, I am not going to give up. Like, this is just going to happen and nothing's going to stop me. So I think, Brian, I think that's, number one, a phenomenal outlook. I'm somewhat jealous because sometimes I don't have that outlook as much as I would really, really like to have it. And you're truly an inspiration, and getting to know you, it's been awesome, man. And part of the reason I want to have you on the show is because I really wanted to illustrate to the guys what you do. And you and I scheduled a coaching call, and I'm going to be very transparent here, guys. I don't have the easiest time from time to time being a father. And what I mean by that is when you're raising 4 boys and you're trying to, and you came from like a childhood that I did, which is a bit chaotic, you don't necessarily have the best template. And I'm not using that as an excuse, but I've always wanted to be I've always wanted to be that person who's leveling up, who's learning, and who's trying to figure it out and trying to be one step ahead of my kids. And basically, to be honest with you, one step ahead of myself, because I can kind of get in my own way. And I reached out to you because I'm like, my 8-year-old in particular he's a great kid. He has a very hard time though with getting his emotions from his head and his heart out of his mouth. Like, he simply acts out, like when he's stressed out. If he's overly tired, if he's sick, if he's stressed out from the day at school, he will just simply act out. And then when you ask him what's wrong, he can't put it into words. And then what happens is I get pissed off, my wife gets pissed off, and then it turns into this heated thing. And I'm like, man, like, what if I could just help this kid communicate a little bit more? Like, what if I could just assist him with getting things from his brain and his heart out? And what would that look like? And that's one of several specialties that you focus on. And when we scheduled the call, it was a 15-minute coaching call. And I was like, man, 15 minutes, what are we going to get done in 15 minutes? And I was blown away. I mean, I'm a pretty emotional, resilient person, but dude, you almost had me in tears in the first 7 minutes we were talking, because you struck so many chords in such a short time. And I've been on many coaching calls. It's something that I invest in all the time, is coaching for myself. But this one was different, very, very different. So I was wondering perhaps if we could use this as an example and tell the guys how it went.
Well, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I have working for me is I have felt emotional and psychological pain at depths the average person can't conceive of. And one of the things that you and I talked about was that if you yourself are unwilling or uncomfortable going to a certain place emotionally, your kid will read that. So if you're asking them to be vulnerable and you can't go there yourself, they won't trust you. They'll back off and say, something about this doesn't feel right. And that was one of the things that I kind of tapped into with you is, are you able to go to the place you're inviting your son to travel with you? And if you're not, how do we get you there?
And the answer to that was honestly no. I mean, my wife and you and I kind of joked about this, but my wife and I have this joke that when my 8-year-old gets stressed out and I get stressed out, we both have something in common, and that's we both act like 8-year-olds. Because I'm not the easiest person when it comes to, again, communicating what's in my head and my heart out of my mouth. You asked me a very interesting question. I don't know if you remember what that is, but if not, I can remind you. But do you remember what you asked me about maybe my background?
Well, we talked about a lot in that short amount of time. So tell me which one is standing out most for you right now.
The one that's standing out for me is because my impression was like, hey, I've got this issue with my son. I'm trying to help him. Like, help me help my son. And the conversation quickly turned into, well, Larry, like real quick, what are your own emotions like? How are you able to comprehend your own emotions? Like when you grew up, were you able to talk about your emotions openly? And I was raised by a mother who drank quite a bit, and so talking about my emotions was never ever a safe thing to do. It was kind of it ebbed and flowed. Like there were times where I could literally talk to my mom about anything, like anything under the sun, and then there were times where I couldn't talk about a thing without getting like just chastised and yelled at. And so, at a young age, I would say my early teenage years, I mean, like literally, I think at one point I was like, the hell with it. Like, I'm not saying anything anymore. Like, I'm done. And I really stopped talking about my feelings because it just wasn't a safe place to be. And as I've gotten older, that question that, you challenged me with, I can definitely tell it's impacted my life several ways, because I see it show up in my marriage. I see it show up with my kids. There's a certain point that I'm okay with being vulnerable, and then I stop or I don't do it anymore. And maybe that's something I need to work on.
Absolutely. And do you remember, there's one thing, I don't remember if I could recall the exact words that I used, but do you remember what I suggested to you in terms of making peace with that part of your life?
No, you're going to have to, with that part of my life, you're going to have to remind me. And this is going to be good because I need a review. We went over so much in such a short period of time.
What I said to you is there needs to be a part of you where you forgive your mother for creating that kind of a belief for you that being transparent, being vulnerable, sharing your emotions was something that would result in shame or scolding or criticism. And now you're trying to find a place in yourself where you are giving your son permission to believe something that you don't believe. So you have to be able to say, Mom, I know I'm never going to hear this from you directly. I know you're never going to say sorry, but I have to forgive you for not being the mother that I needed, but for being the mother that I had, and give you credit for that. And then give myself, and this is the key shift, give yourself, Larry, permission to say, I need a different belief now, something that serves me better, because the relationship I had with my mother was just that. But the relationship I want to have with my son requires me to become the father he needs me to be. So you need a new belief and then learn some new behaviors around that.
Yeah, and that was definitely, I mean, that was incredibly impactful because, if I look at the relationship that I had with my mom growing up, I would say, I think my mom, definitely did the best she could with what she had at the time. I mean, granted, there was a lot of alcohol use in there and that kind of thing, but at the same time, I've definitely learned that forgiveness, it only impacts the person who holds any type of grudge. But I guess the thing that I'm dealing with now is trying to help break that cycle and help my kids. So part of the reason I wanted to have you on the podcast, especially 5 Minute Thursdays, is I know there are parents out there that kids are trying to convey a message or they're trying to communicate something. And sometimes it's not within the context that we feel as parents is acceptable. And then we get upset and then we get pissed off. And then it turns into this whole just blow up, terrible thing that can, pretty much taint a relationship. So what would you say to parents in general? Because the time that we spent, the 15 minutes we spent, was certainly impactful. But if you could maybe broadly or generically, address almost any parent when it comes to that situation, what would you say the best course of action is?
Well, one thing that I found out over time with the kids that I work with is it is critical that you accept the understanding that our kids are born digital. They know texting and they know internet. They know short video clips. And they are learning to think more and more in chunks than they are in these long, wordy conversations that we like to tend to have. I mean, I don't know about you, Larry, but I was raised before video games. When I remember when voicemail didn't exist yet, and we had phones that were plugged into the wall and had a cord. And if you wanted to see if your friend was home, you had to walk to his house. So it's a very different generation. So there are different rules and expectations in terms of what it means to communicate with each other. And there's also this tendency for parents to think in a very all or nothing way, very authoritarian. I'm the parent, you need to do what I say so because. And these kids that are of the digital age think much more egalitarian, much more win-win. They want to think much more in terms of fairness. And you'll keep bumping your heads against these kids because you have a different set of rules for where the power balance needs to be, how rules are decided upon, and you really need to know how to get into your kid's world and figure out the decisions he or she has made about the way the world works. And if you can't tap into that, you will be forever frustrated.
That makes sense, man. I mean, I think frustrating is, sometimes when we're trying to be the best for our kids, we feel like, we're speaking English and they're speaking Chinese or vice versa. And sometimes if we can create a bridge between that gap, just imagine what the possibilities would be. One of the things we always try to focus on at the GDP is giving guys the tools, the resources that they need. So, 30 years from now, they're not saying, oh man, I wish I would have just done this just slightly different or, just made this slight tweak. It would have made all the difference in the world. And I see you doing that in a very powerful way, in the exact way that you just described, which is in these 15-minute coaching sessions, which I believe, for me, and guys, I've experienced this with Brian already, and I'll be scheduling, I'm actually going to be talking to him again for another coaching session. But for busy fathers who literally want impactful information in a short amount of time that will literally, I think, leave you speechless, it's a profound way to coach. So tell us again, like, how do you package up your coaching and how do you help parents in this 15-minute window?
Well, what I do is I make things as portable and digital as possible because I work not only with the parents, I work with the kids. So it's got to be in the way they're used to engaging information. So I've created a lot of video instruction and put it behind a membership site. And these 15-minute chunks are in addition to a lot of email exchanges. You know, I don't know if I've done it with you yet, but I record videos that fit right in the email. And the person can watch it in their email. This is a client this morning. I'm working with her teenage daughter, but the teenage daughter is very shy, doesn't want to talk. So I send her these videos in her email that are directly addressed to her, and she loves watching me talking to her by name, and then she'll respond to me by Facebook Messenger. And that's how it works best for her. And for busy dads, you know, hey, you're taking a break at work, something came up, something's bugging you, you feel stuck in it. You send me a text and saying, this is the problem, I don't know what to do. I respond to you with a video. You see the lesson, you can ingest it, you hear me, you see me, you feel my energy, and then you can use that strategy right where you are, wherever you are in your day. And if we do have the opportunity to set up a 15-minute coaching call, what I do is I zero in on the set of beliefs and the story that you've created around that challenge you're having, and I look for the slightest opening where we can create a shift to help you break out of that story and see a new possibility for yourself. And I'm so skilled at that I don't need a half an hour or an hour to talk to you. I can do it with laser focused precision.
Yes, you can. And that's, you know, I mean, because I've experienced this firsthand. And guys, let me just say for disclosure's sake, if you decide to start coaching with Brian, I don't have a financial interest in, I mean, Brian and I don't have an affiliate relationship or anything like that. I just wanted to bring what Brian does to the table for a 5-Minute Thursday because I've gotten to see it firsthand. And it's something that I've never experienced before, you know, as far as coaching goes, like in such short increments, but yet so incredibly powerful. And then at the end of our 15-minute coaching, I mean, it wasn't planned whatsoever. The last session that we had, I was like, dude, you got to come on the show and talk about this because what you're doing is so different and it's so profound and it's pretty much so perfect that other people just really need to know about this. And I mean, that's why I want to have Brian on the show. Number one, he's got an incredible story. He's got an incredible skill to really tap in, reach you within a short amount of time. And so, Brian, where can our guys find you? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, probably the easiest way to find me is through my website, which is brianraymondking.com. But probably the best or easiest place to reach me is look me up on social media. I'm extremely active on Facebook, not only in your group, Larry, which is absolutely tremendous. You know, I have my groups for ADHD and for fatherhood, and I'm very easy to find. So look me up either place and we'll connect.
That'd be awesome. Guys, for all the links, so I'm going to have all of Brian's links here in the show notes, which is gooddadproject.com/Thursday25. You can also hook up with Brian in the Dad Edge group on Facebook. And if you're not a member of that group on Facebook, go to this episode and request entry. In this episode, again, gooddadproject.com/Thursday25. In the resource center, I've got a link for the Dad Edge Facebook group. Also have a link for Brian King's, all of his social media links and his website and everything else. But Brian, dude, it's been awesome having you on. This has by far been the longest 5-Minute Thursday. It's now 24-Minute Thursday. But like I said, the coaching call that I had with you was so cool, so different, and I had to have you on because other people need to know what you're doing and know how impactful it is.
I really appreciate you, Larry. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Man, no problem. Guys, we'll see you on Monday on our big show. Have a great weekend.